There's that quote, life is hard, so make it work. But life will never be easy. It's not linear. It's always going to be full of its ups and downs. And truly, it's what we make of it. And a recent study pulled that only 14% of U.S. adults had reported themselves to be very happy, which is down from the 31% from a survey that took place in 2018. Welcome, my PowHERHouses, to another episode of Becoming PowHERHouse. And I wanted to take some time today to just talk about some things to consider to be happier, right? And it's, of course, not realistic to be happy every day, but what is happiness? And should we perhaps be considering fulfillment, becoming stronger, mentally tough, and really choosing the perspective to take, because we get to do this thing called life. We don't have to do it. And as entrepreneurs, I think we can feel sometimes like we can wake up in the morning, we like put on these combat boots because we just don't know whether or not we're going to get our ass kicked. And then we head in, we're ready to swing. And some days are amazing. We're like on top of the world and we feel like we're crushing it. Everything is going well. Our team is humming, and so excited about the future. And then no more than 24 hours later, we can feel like we're ready to give up and like close the shop, right? Depending on what we're experiencing. And hopefully there's more than 24 hours in between your swings, but sometimes you just never know, especially depending on the journey that you're in right now within your entrepreneurial cycle. And I can attest to this. And sometimes it's years where, it just feels like you're getting beat up. Even if you're having a good year in business from a profit perspective, you can be dealing with some really challenging things. And I can even speak to that, of course, in owning a financial planning firm and what 2020 felt like. It literally was a year of reckoning. I mean, it went into 2020 not having any idea whether or not we would even break even. And for a few months, I'm fairly certain Sarah and I didn't even sleep. Like, we could have put a sleeping bag at the office for the amount of work that we were doing, the calls we were fielding, talking people off of the ledge, and just really making sure that we were present and available for our clients in crisis when the market was taking a massively quick dive. And then when things were on the upswing, we were still there talking about what's next, how to cope with this, what do we do? And then putting education out there every single day, because we thought it was so important to make sure that everybody was getting what they needed, especially from a small business perspective, because things were changing every single day with updates, what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, what kind of funding was out there, how do we process PPP, so it was a whole year of just extreme and intense stress. And then 2021 came and we thought, yeah, it's going to be a great year. And then it was hard again, and I'm feeling now heading into 2024 that I am not setting any expectations, good, bad, and different. It's an election year too. So, Jesus take the wheel. But, in those moments, however, when we had those cycles, I felt this deep gratitude in knowing that, yeah, this is really tough. And I'm grateful to be in this position because I, in fact, get to do it, right? And it's a huge privilege. And I think sometimes we can forget that a challenge is a privilege, to be able to be faced with something that we're able to figure out, that we're able to correct or provide assistance or help to others to create a positive impact is really quite a privilege. And it's taken me many, many years, a lot of self-help books, self-development, coaching, and so on, to now with firm confidence to always take that perspective. And when it does feel like things are imploding around me, or I get this, all of a sudden, emergency news, put out the fires, that I now can take a step back and digest and say, okay, how are we going to handle it? Because quitting is not an option. Throwing a temper tantrum, not an option, although it sounds appealing sometimes. Crying, not effective, but sometimes we need to let it out. So it's just not easy, guys. And so if you can think about almost a contingency plan for emergency, right? How will I choose to cope moving forward so that my ultimate overall happiness can go up a little bit because of how we choose to deal with conflict. And this may be something that you maybe need help with, maybe a coach or a consultant or a communication expert, where they can help you with how to communicate effectively with impact, whether it's within your organization or outside of it. Because all of these things relate to truly our ability to stay above the bar, right? And not get sucked into that black hole. The next is thinking about failure, right? And you will fail. Of course, you can't have success without failure. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you've already experienced it a number of times. I know I sure have. And I did used to be that person who would just completely become paralyzed when I failed. And I didn't know how to handle it because I am hard on myself and I would feel so defeated. And now I do take more chances, more risk, and I arguably always have, but knowing that, hey, there's a chance I am going to fall on my face, and that's okay, because now I look at that as a gift, and I tend to use my failures as a superpower. But again, that's a perspective that I have learned over time to say, okay, I failed, that sucked, maybe it hurt my ego a little bit, but what can I take from this? What is the value here? What is the lesson so that I can really build off of it versus letting it hold me back? And that also too has allowed me to continue on a more positive perspective, but then a happier life. And I will say, I am so grateful to be a person who really is relatively happy. And it's part of my mission to always be the light, not only within our organization, but for others as well. And I'm sharing these things with you in this podcast because these are the things that I choose to do, but have helped with happiness. Because, man, I do not want you to be part of this American population in declining happiness and loneliness, which is my next thing. A lot of what can make us feel depressed is loneliness. And there was another study I read, and I cannot remember the exact numbers, but we're lonely. We are lonelier than we have ever been. And sometimes it's subconscious. We don't even know we're doing it or isolating ourselves. And I was just having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine the other day, actually, and we hadn't seen each other in a really long time. And it's not that we didn't want to see each other. We just didn't. And the reason is we just both felt like we were in the grind. We were in it. And sometimes when you're in this cycle or season of your life where you're busting your ass, you're working all the time, and then when you come home, you have to make dinner or feed yourself, work out, or whatever it is that you have to do. And then even though you want to see someone or talk to somebody, sometimes you're almost too tired to even think about it, right? And then the cycle continues. And then you feel like, oh, I can't reach out to that person. I can't tell them my problems, or I can't talk to them because I haven't talked to them in so long. I don't want them to think I'm only reaching out when I have problems. And then sometimes we tell ourselves this story and the cycle continues. And so we were kind of talking through that and saying like, man, like, how did we get here? Let's not ever do this again. Let's make sure that if we're in the vortex, we get out. We reach out, and who cares what we're reaching out about, even if it is to talk something out or a problem or an issue. It's not all unicorns and rainbows, but to be lonely is this perpetual cycle that can cause you to feel depressed. So call yourself out on that. If you haven't hung out with a positive group of people or people who really make you feel good, uplifted, empowered, make a point to always have that in your schedule. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, who you're surrounding yourself with, your circle, the rooms you're putting yourself in. And so if that hasn't happened in a while, make it happen, even if it feels exhausting. I promise you, when you leave that room, when you leave that dinner, when you leave that conversation, that event, you will feel better. I can tell you and promise you, historically 100% of the time where I felt too exhausted, didn't feel like it, right? Of going to something where I knew though there were people in that room who would definitely inspire and empower me no matter how much I didn't walk through the door. When I walked out of the door, I felt like a new person. And so be mindful of that and making sure that whether it's once a week, once every other week, once a month, please do not let it be longer than once a month where you're not doing something like this, whether it's a stretchy rubber band moment type of networking event or just having a standing dinner with girlfriends. Don't forget to do that, you guys. So important to your overall happiness and then not feeling so isolated and lonely. And perhaps you need a group of other entrepreneurs, right? So if you haven't found that yet, there's so many wonderful organizations out there that do have meetings available, forums, roundtables for other entrepreneurs. WPO, the Women's Presidents Association or organization rather. I've been in that almost for 7 years now. Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, there's ABWA, NABO, so many. And if you have questions of what's the right fit for you, I've done it all. I'm currently active in EO. I'm currently active in WPO as well. Happy to speak to that. Happy to connect you with whoever I can because our connections absolutely help drive our overall happiness and making sure that you're just not feeling lonely because there's a difference between dinner with girlfriends and then the ability to collaborate with other fellow entrepreneurs because I do hear all the time that like, yeah, you know what? I have these relationships, but I still feel really lonely and isolated because nobody understands or gets my unique problems and challenges. And so there are definitely two different sides of that to take into consideration and certainly have in the equation. The next is, how many times do you find yourself saying, I can't? I can't right now. I'm too busy. I'm in it. It's not the right time. Work is too intense. I can't step away. And you've canceled a vacation. You've canceled a long weekend. You've canceled a massage. There may not be a tomorrow. And life will always be busy and there may not ever be a perfect time to take a break. And maybe you have to modify your break, but try not to cancel the break because living that life where you're constantly on go and overdrive may force you to feel completely burnt out or seeming like you might not see the end of the tunnel. I used to also be that person and I love working, right? So it is so easy for me to make excuses, to cancel things, to postpone things, to not do things because I could like lock myself in an office for like a year and never come out and be just fine. It's never noticed. But what that does is it totally affects my happiness. It affects my level of creativity, innovation, vision. I know I need those breaks, but I have to force them upon myself. And I'm actually talking about this because I was just in a group chat with my two best friends in the world. And we had a long weekend scheduled and they both canceled it, and of course they have wonderful reasons. They're both going just through an intense time right now at work. And that long weekend arguably is scheduled at a bad time for me too. It's the weekend after our summit. I'm sure I'm going to have a ton on my plate. But it's there, it's in my calendar. And it was important to me to have that moment with my two best friends because let's face it, all of us have been in it lately. And I was looking forward to just that connection. And so it's not a good time for me. It's easy for me to jump on their bandwagon and say, hey, you know what? Yep, let's cancel it. Let's do something, in May or June, of which we will, but keeping that on my calendar. And I'm going to find somebody else to go with me because it's there, it's blocked out, and I know that I'll regret it if I don't, and I could die tomorrow, right? That's how I'm looking at it now. And that's not the old me, that's the current me. This is the me that is trying to be more intentional with my relationships and the people I care about and just being more present because it is just as hard to block in free time as it is to block in time to get shit done. And so think of those moments that you're spending. Are you fully present? Are you allowing yourself to unplug, even if the time doesn't feel right? Can you schedule that in still and make it happen? I'll never forget the time, and I can't remember if I told this story on this podcast or not. So if it's a repeat, y'all, forgive me. But It was when I first launched the business. So now we're going back over 10 years, and my husband bought me a massage. He bought me a massage, and it was a full 90 minutes, and I should have been elated, right? I should have been like, thank you, God. I am so exhausted. I really need this massage. And it was on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of the day. And I remember vividly laying on that massage table, not enjoying the massage, but beating myself up, saying on repeat all of the things that I knew I should have been doing instead, and all my to-do lists, right? I have to do this. I have to do that. Yeah, like, that is bullshit. And I used to do that to myself all the time. Like, if I wasn't working, if I wasn't grinding, I felt like I was failing. And the reality is me working and grinding all the time was causing me to not grow. It was causing me to not grow. And constantly I was hitting like the ceiling because I was so depleted. I didn't have the ability to get outside of myself. I didn't have the ability to really have a fresh vision and truly grow and expand. And so until I did that, I wasn't able to grow and expand. So I'll leave you, with that thought on just like, life is precious. It's so precious. You just never know. And so these moments, you guys, are critical to have them, to block them in, and to not delete them from your calendar, because they're so meaningful. And they might not be, and just as meaningful as they are to you, like, they might be more meaningful to the people that you have them scheduled with as well. So keep that in mind. And so the next is, be very careful as to what you're choosing to listen to and the information you're taking in. So what I mean by that is, we are in this world of constant information pushing, okay? So whether it's the news, social media, wherever you look, and most of it isn't factual. A lot of it is one-sided. And so what I'm trying to say here is, I think if you are always digesting headlines, but never digging in or never choosing where you're actually going to get your information from, it can really seem like sometimes the world is ending, and that can be depleting too, but also deciphering some of this and deciding, hey, like, is this an opinion or is it fact, right? Even what we're telling ourselves, is it opinion or fact? Most of the time, it's opinion, not fact, especially when it comes to self-talk. But be careful of that, and careful of how you also talk to yourself, right? Like, what are you allowing in, and how are you allowing that to affect you? So can you be like super protective of yourself, your being, and what comes in? Okay. Because it's getting more and more hard. We're constantly bombarded with these things. And then also because we're constantly bombarded with these things and all these opinions and whatever is flowing, it forces us sometimes to look inward and feel not so great about ourselves. And again, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and she's going through a really difficult time, a divorce, and work is hard. And people keep asking her, how are you doing this? How are you not falling apart? If I were you, I'd be having a nervous breakdown. If I were you, I'd be crying all the time, And she's like, well, I'm handling it. I'm not crying. I keep waiting. I keep waiting for myself to have a mental breakdown. I keep waiting for myself to fall apart, but I'm not. Like, is something wrong with me? No, nothing's wrong with her. She's strong and resilient as fuck. And she's beautiful. And sometimes I think we forget how powerful we are. But what we tend to do is take everybody else's opinion of what they're tossing on us or what they would do if they were us. And we start to feel like, is there something wrong with me? Should I be sad? Should I be this? Should I be that? And the reality is we all deal with things very differently. We all have a very different level of mental strength and stability and capacity. And just because someone else says that they would deal with something a certain way doesn't mean that that's how you need to deal with it. You deal with it in a way that serves you and what feels good to you. And if you are a survivor and you're getting through this difficult time or this difficult thing and keeping it all together, keep keeping it all together. It's all good. So don't forget that. And I can actually relate to that, even thinking back, 7 years ago when I went through that traumatic time with my husband, and he was in the hospital in a coma, and I was taking care of everything and not knowing what was going to happen tomorrow. And I was still running the business, his business, our home, and the doctor's appointments, and I was doing all of these things at 30 years old that, well, shit, I wasn't planning on doing until I was like 80. Okay. But I did it. I didn't break down. I got through, and it's almost like I just knew I had to put one foot in front of the other and get through today so I could see tomorrow. And the reason I didn't fall apart is because I didn't have the choice to fall apart. But if I would have listened to everybody around me saying I should have fallen apart, or I should have divorced my husband, or questioning me on, how I'm still doing what I'm doing, if I listened to all of that, I would have been a walking train wreck. So sometimes we just need to build like this force shield around us and be so protective of that and what comes in and what goes out. And the next is, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? And what I mean by that is, who are you becoming and what do you want most? What do you want your life to look like? And do you need to consider making a list of things that you just need to stop doing or let go of, right? We're constantly adding goals, things that we want to accomplish, things that we want to do. But when was the last time you made a list of all the things you should stop doing that aren't aligned with what you want to accomplish? So think of that. It's my challenge for you. What are the list of things that you should stop doing, cut out of your life, or let go of that just aren't in line with who you are anymore, or that feel heavy, feel like a burden? This is your permission to make the stop doing list and do it, right? And whatever is on that list too that you don't like anymore, but let's say it still needs to get done, who can you delegate it to? Who can you hire it out to? But life is too short for you to do it if you really hate it. So those are my things. That is what I have for you guys today, as far as some ideas that I have that may help you feel a little happier, a little lighter in terms of changing your perspective on some things and just being protective of what you're letting in. Until next time, my powerhouses, continue to be courageous.